Blackwood Hall sits on 3 acres in Shelbyville, Kentucky. White clapboard siding, red roof, shuttered windows, front porch with columns. Built in 1866, 1 year after the Civil War ended. 5,000 square feet. Not a mansion, a house. Colonel Harland Sanders moved there in 1959. He was 69 years old. He'd spent the previous 40 years failing at everything. Farmhand, streetcar conductor, railroad fireman, insurance salesman, lawyer until he punched his own client, ferry boat operator until a bridge made his service obsolete, oil lamp salesman until electricity reached rural America, gas station owner until the Great Depression forced him to close, another gas station owner until a shootout with a competitor left one man dead. By 1955, Sanders was 65 and broke, living on a $105 per month Social Security check. The new Interstate 75 had bypassed his restaurant in Corbin, destroying his business. He sold everything, paid his debts, and was left with nothing but a pressure cooker and a recipe for fried chicken. He got in his car and drove, restaurant to restaurant, cooking chicken in their kitchens, asking owners to try it. If they liked it, he'd offer them a deal, 5 cents per chicken sold, and he'd provide the secret blend of 11 herbs and spices in sealed packets so they'd never know the recipe. 1,009 restaurants said no. 1,009 times Sanders heard, "Not interested, too busy, already have chicken, get out." The 1,010th restaurant said yes. Pete Harmon's Dewdrop Inn in Salt Lake City, Utah, 1952. Sanders was 62. By 1959, he had 600 franchises. By 1964, Kentucky Fried Chicken was making millions. Sanders sold the company for $2 million. He was 73 years old when he finally had money. 73 years of struggling, then success. He bought Blackwood Hall that year, made it the headquarters for KFC. He and his wife Claudia lived there until 1984. 25 years in a modest house in Shelbyville, Kentucky, while his face became the most recognizable symbol in fast food. The tragedy isn't that Colonel Sanders struggled. The tragedy is what happened after he succeeded. He sold his company, watched the new owners ruin his recipe, sued them for degrading his life's work, settled for a fraction of what he asked, and spent his final years as a mascot for food he called wallpaper paste. He died wearing the white suit he'd adopted as a costume. His wife, Claudia, the woman who packaged spices at midnight, who helped build the empire, who got a restaurant named after her, lived in his shadow until she died 16 years later. Blackwood Hall was put up for sale in 2022. The asking price dropped from $9 million to $4.9 million by 2023. It includes the house, the restaurant, all the memorabilia, and the trademark to Claudia Sanders' name and likeness. Everything Colonel Sanders built, everything he fought for, everything he lost control of, for sale to the highest bidder. This isn't a story about a mansion built with dirty money. It's a story about a modest house bought with hard-earned success, and what that success cost the man who finally achieved it. If you enjoy stories about American entrepreneurs who succeeded late in life only to watch their legacies commodified, about women who built empires but got footnotes, about houses that represent both triumph and tragedy, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which other properties tied to famous brands I should explore next. Your support makes these investigations into the real stories behind American icons possible. Thank you for being here. Let's begin with the man himself, because before there was Blackwood Hall, before there was KFC, before there was a white-suited colonel smiling from a bucket, there was Harland Sanders, a boy who lost his father at 6 and spent the next 60 years trying to find solid ground.
Henryville, Indiana, September 9th, 1890. Harland David Sanders was born on a farm a few miles outside of town. His father, Wilbur, owned the farm. His mother, Margaret, raised 3 children. Wilbur died when Harland was 6 years old. Margaret took a job at a canning factory. Long hours, low pay. She left before dawn, returned after dark. Someone had to care for the younger children. Someone had to cook. Harland learned. By age 7, he could prepare a full meal. Pan-fried chicken, biscuits, vegetables. He watched his younger brother and sister while his mother worked. He became the man of the house at an age when most children are learning to read. His mother remarried. The stepfather didn't like Harland. The feeling was mutual. At age 10, Harland left home to work as a farmhand. At 12, he dropped out of school, 7th grade, the end of his formal education. He drifted. Jobs came and went. In 1906, at 16, he lied about his age and joined the U.S. Army. He was sent to Cuba as a wagoner. He served a few months, was honorably discharged in 1907. He didn't earn the rank of colonel there. That would come later, and it wouldn't be military. After the Army, Sanders worked on the railroad as a laborer and fireman. He studied law at night through a correspondence course. By his early 20s, he had a law degree from LaSalle Extension University. He began practicing law in Justice of the Peace Courts in Alabama. His legal career ended when he got into a fistfight with his own client in the courtroom. His reputation was destroyed. He moved on. In 1909, he married Josephine King. He was 19. They had 3 children, Margaret Josephine in 1910, Harland Josephine in 1912, Mildred Marie in 1919. The marriage was strained from the beginning. Sanders couldn't hold a job. He tried insurance sales, fired. He started a ferryboat service across the Ohio River. A bridge was built nearby, rendering his service useless. He sold oil lamps. Electricity reached rural America, and no one needed lamps anymore. His son, Harland Jr., died in 1932, at age 20. Tonsillectomy complications, blood poisoning, a routine procedure that killed him. Sanders sank into depression. Biographers describe a period of darkness. His marriage deteriorated further. He kept working, kept failing. One story that didn't make it into his autobiographies: Josephine gave birth to a stillborn baby in the 1920s. Sanders, broke and struggling, couldn't afford a proper funeral. He sawed wood and built a tiny coffin. A neighbor gave him a silk nightgown to wrap the infant's body. The baby was buried in a pauper's cemetery in Henryville. Sanders never spoke of it publicly. By 1930, he was 40 years old, married, depressed, broke, jobless. He took over a Shell oil gas station in Nicholasville, Kentucky. The Great Depression hit. He closed it the same year. He opened another gas station in Corbin, Kentucky in 1930. This one had a back room where he could serve simple meals to travelers: pan-fried chicken, ham, string beans, biscuits. The food was good. Word spread. People started coming for the meals, not the gas. Sanders moved across the street to a motel and restaurant where he could seat more customers. Sanders Court and Cafe, 140 seats by 1940. He perfected his chicken recipe during this time, a blend of 11 herbs and spices, pressure-cooked to reduce cooking time from 30 minutes to 9. In 1935, Governor Ruby Laffoon made Sanders a Kentucky Colonel, an honorary title recognizing his contribution to the state's cuisine. Sanders started wearing the white suit and black string tie, the costume, the persona. Then came another fight. Matt Stewart, who owned a competing gas station, started painting over Sanders's road signs. Sanders confronted him. Gunfire. Sanders shot Stewart's manager, who died. Stewart was convicted of murder and sentenced to 18 years. Sanders was cleared, self-defense. The restaurant thrived. Duncan Hines, the famous food critic, gave it a glowing review. By the 1940s, Sanders Court and Cafe was successful. Then came Interstate 75, bypassing Corbin, bypassing Sanders's restaurant. In 1956, Sanders sold the restaurant at auction. After paying debts, he had his $105 per month Social Security check. Nothing else. He was 65 years old. Most men retire. Sanders got in his car and started driving. The sales pitch was simple. Sanders would walk into a restaurant unannounced. He'd introduce himself. Colonel Sanders, inventor of a special fried chicken recipe. He'd ask to cook a batch for the staff. If they agreed, he'd go into the kitchen with his pressure cooker and his sealed packets of spices. He'd fry chicken. The staff would taste it. If they liked it, Sanders would propose a deal. The restaurant pays him a nickel for every chicken sold using his recipe. He'd supply the spice blend in packets, sealed so they'd never know the formula. Most restaurant owners said no. Too complicated. Already have chicken. Not interested. Get out. Sanders kept going.
He slept in his car. He begged meals from friends. He and Claudia, his second wife, whom he'd married in 1949 after divorcing Josephine, lived out of the car for months at a time. The rejections piled up. 100, 200, 500, 1,000. Legend says Sanders heard no 1,009 times before he heard yes. The yes came from Pete Harmon in Salt Lake City. Sanders stopped at Harmon's Dewdrop Inn on his way to Australia in 1952. He cooked chicken for Harmon and his family. They loved it. Harmon agreed to try it in his restaurant. 2 weeks later, Sanders and Claudia returned from San Francisco. They stopped in Salt Lake City to visit Harmon. The restaurant's windows were painted with a massive sign, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Something new, something different. Harmon's sales tripled in the first year. 75% of the increase came from fried chicken. Sanders had his first franchise. He was 62. He spent the next 8 years on the road franchising the recipe. By 1960, he had 200 franchises in the U.S. and Canada. By 1964, 600. The business grew faster than Sanders could manage. He had 17 employees, an office, a warehouse. In 1959, he and Claudia moved to Shelbyville, Kentucky, and bought Blackwood Hall. It became KFC's headquarters. The house itself, 5,000 square feet, built in 1866. Traditional Kentucky architecture, clapboard siding, shuttered windows, front porch. Named after a Nancy Drew novel, according to family lore. The Sanderses paid an undisclosed amount, probably modest, given that Shelbyville in the late 1950s wasn't an expensive market. They lived there for 25 years. The house contained the stove Sanders used to train new franchisees. His original pressure cooker sat in the kitchen. His monogrammed Bible, his cufflinks, his Kentucky Colonel certificate, all kept in Blackwood Hall. The adjacent building, constructed in 1959, served as KFC's warehouse and office space. Claudia worked there, packaging spice blends, handling orders, late nights, early mornings. The unspoken hero, one listing agent would later call her. By 1964, KFC had 600 franchises and was bringing in roughly $1,000 a day. Sanders was 73. He'd spent 8 years traveling 200,000 miles annually, franchising chicken, building an empire. He was tired. He wanted to retire. He sold Kentucky Fried Chicken to a group of investors for $2 million, roughly $19 million in 2023 dollars. He stayed on as brand ambassador for $40,000 a year. The investors took KFC public in 1966. By 1970, there were 3,000 restaurants in 48 countries. Sanders should have been satisfied. He'd succeeded. He was wealthy. He was famous. But he wasn't satisfied because the new owners changed the recipe.
Sanders had perfected his gravy. He'd bragged it was so good it'll make you throw away the darn chicken and just eat the gravy. The new owners simplified it. Flour, starch, tap water. Faster to make, cheaper. Sanders tasted it and was disgusted. He called it wallpaper paste. He started making surprise visits to KFC restaurants. If the food disappointed him, he'd denounce it to the franchisee. "Goddamned slop," he'd say. He'd push plates onto the floor. The new owners were not pleased. In 1968, Sanders and Claudia opened their own restaurant in Shelbyville. Originally called The Colonel's Lady, later renamed Claudia Sanders Dinner House. They served Southern cooking, Kentucky ham, biscuits, fried green tomatoes, chicken cooked with Sanders' original recipe, not the degraded KFC version. Sanders planned to franchise it, a new chain, independent of KFC, serving food the way it should be served. KFC's parent company, now Harland Inc., found out. They sent lawyers. Sanders had sold the rights to his name and image. He couldn't use Colonel Sanders or Kentucky Fried Chicken to promote a competing business. Sanders responded with a lawsuit. He sued Harland for $122 million, claiming they'd misused his image to promote products he hadn't developed and food he didn't approve. The case settled out of court in 1973. Sanders got $1 million. The restaurant was renamed Claudia Sanders Dinner House. No mention of the Colonel, no reference to KFC. Sanders agreed to stop publicly criticizing Kentucky Fried Chicken. One condition? Sanders would give the new owners a personal cooking lesson. They'd learn how to make the chicken properly. Whether they used that lesson is unclear. Sanders continued to despise KFC's food for the rest of his life.
In 1975, he told a journalist, "My God, that gravy is horrible. They buy tap water for 15 to 20 cents 1,000 gallons, and then they mix it with flour and starch and end up with pure wallpaper paste." He remained KFC's brand ambassador, traveling the world, appearing in commercials, signing autographs, 200,000 miles a year, even into his 80s. The white suit, the string tie, the goatee, the smile. The costume had become a prison. At home in Blackwood Hall, Sanders was just Harland. He attended the First Christian Church in Shelbyville. He entertained friends. He cooked meals in the kitchen where he'd trained franchisees. He and Claudia lived quietly, a famous man, in a modest house. But the world only saw the Colonel, the cartoon, the mascot. In 1976, Colonel Sanders was ranked the world's second most recognizable celebrity. His face was on billboards, buckets, commercials. His image was everywhere. The man himself was disappearing. Claudia Ellen Leddington was born September 9, 1902, in Knox County, Kentucky, near London. She married Charles Price in 1921 at age 18. They had 3 children, Charles, Elvis, and Billy. The marriage ended in divorce. She moved to Corbin, where her parents lived, and took a job as a waitress at Sanders Court and Cafe. Sanders was still married to Josephine at the time, but the marriage was failing. Claudia and Sanders began an affair. It became an open secret. Josephine hired Claudia to help around the cafe, knowing full well her husband was sleeping with the waitress. In 1947, after 39 years of marriage, Sanders and Josephine divorced. Sanders married Claudia on November 17, 1949, in Corbin. He'd wanted to marry her for years. They combined families. Sanders had 3 children from his first marriage. His son had died in 1932, leaving 2 daughters. Claudia had 3 from her first marriage. They set up housekeeping in Corbin, where Sanders perfected his chicken recipe and expanded the restaurant. When Sanders started franchising in 1952, Claudia became his partner. She packaged spice blends. She took phone calls from franchisees. She shipped orders to train stations, often late at night. She managed logistics while Sanders traveled. A 1991 interview with Claudia described her role. Restaurants in other states would phone in orders, and she'd package the spices and take them to the train station, often late at night. By 1963, they had 600 franchises and were making about $1,000 a day. When Sanders sold KFC in 1964, Claudia's role ended. The company moved its headquarters out of Blackwood Hall. She and Sanders were no longer operators, they were retirees. Except Sanders couldn't retire. He kept traveling as KFC's ambassador. Claudia stayed home. In 1968, when Sanders opened the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, it was his way of honoring her. Claudia was the unspoken hero of her husband's success in business, one family representative later said. And he wanted to honor her by creating Claudia Sanders Dinner House and associated brands. The restaurant became Claudia's domain. She greeted guests. She supervised the kitchen. She ensured the recipes were authentic. While Sanders traveled the world promoting KFC, Claudia ran the dinner house. She was also a Kentucky colonel, an honorary title bestowed by the governor. But she preferred to go by her regular name. She didn't want the spotlight. In 1970, the Sanderses sold the dinner house to their close friends Thomas and Sherry Settle. The Settles had worked for the Sanderses for years. Thomas Settle was like family. Sanders walked Cherry down the aisle at her wedding. The Sanderses remained involved. They visited the restaurant. They advised the Settles. The dinner house continued to serve Sanders's original recipes. In 1984, Sanders and Claudia sold Blackwood Hall to the Settles and moved to Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, where Sanders oversaw KFC's Canadian franchises. They lived in a bungalow at 1337 Melton Drive until Sanders' death in 1980. Claudia returned to Shelbyville after Sanders died. She lived there until her death on December 31, 1996. She was 94. She outlived her husband by 16 years. She watched KFC become a global corporation, 25,000 stores in 145 countries by the 2020s. She watched Sanders's image become a cartoon, a mascot, a marketing tool. She never gave many interviews. She stayed out of the spotlight. the unspoken hero.
On November 7, 1980, Harland Sanders was hospitalized in Louisville with leukemia and pneumonia. He'd been sick for weeks, but had continued traveling, making appearances, promoting KFC. He died on December 16, 1980. He was 90 years old. His body was dressed in his white suit, white shirt, and black string tie. His walking cane was tucked under his right arm. He was placed in an open casket at the Hall Taylor Funeral Home in Shelbyville. Mourners filed past, neighbors, friends, residents of Shelbyville who'd known Sanders for 20 years, his wife, Claudia, his 2 daughters, 19 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. D.C. Poe, an 86-year-old merchant from Shelbyville, attended. He'd known Sanders for more than 35 years. He recalled Sanders attending a free Sunday breakfast at Poe's church and insisting on paying $5. He wanted to pay for it. He said, "You've got to take it." The next day, Sanders's body was displayed in the rotunda of the Kentucky State Capitol in Frankfort. Flags across Kentucky flew at half-staff. Kentucky Governor John Y. Brown, Jr. attended the viewing. Brown had been one of the investors who bought KFC from Sanders in 1964. He'd made millions from the deal. He was now governor. He'd commissioned a bust of Sanders before his death. Once completed, Sanders's image would join Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis in the Capitol's Marble Hall. On December 20, 1980, Sanders's funeral was held at Alumni Memorial Chapel at the Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville. Claudia had requested the location. Sanders and Claudia were members of the First Christian Church in Shelbyville, but she wanted a larger venue. 1,200 people attended: dignitaries, friends, KFC executives. Pastor James Lee Collins, Jr. of the Shelbyville Church read New Testament passages on resurrection. He said, "Although we have experienced a great loss, the Colonel would not have us begin this service without joy and praise to God. Therefore, if the Colonel himself could choose the hymn that we would celebrate his life with, we feel very sure that it would be Joy to the World." Singer Pat Boone performed What a Friend We Have in Jesus and He Touched Me at Sanders's request. Sanders was buried at Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville. Claudia's name is engraved on the stone beside his. She would join him there 16 years later. At the time of Sanders' death, there were an estimated 6,000 KFC outlets in 48 countries worldwide. Annual sales, $2 billion, roughly $7.3 billion in 2023 dollars. Sanders's estate was valued at $3.5 million. He'd sold the company for $2 million in 1964. He'd earned royalties from Canadian franchises and appearance fees for 16 years. He'd lived modestly in Blackwood Hall, traveled constantly, and died wealthy but not extravagantly so. The real wealth went to the investors who'd bought KFC from him. They'd turned $2 million into billions. Sanders had created an empire. Others had profited from it. After Sanders's death, KFC's fortunes exploded. By 1991, the company was rebranded from Kentucky Fried Chicken to KFC, distancing itself from its southern roots. By 2017, KFC enjoyed a net income of $436 million in the fourth quarter alone. Sanders's image became ubiquitous: commercials, billboards, buckets, toys, video games. In 1998, an animated version of Colonel Sanders, voiced by Randy Quaid, appeared in television commercials. In 2015, KFC brought back a live-action Colonel, played by comedian Darrell Hammond. Some critics called the portrayal distasteful and disrespectful of the actual man's legacy. Other actors followed.
Norm Macdonald, Darrell Hammond, Jim Gaffigan, George Hamilton, Rob Riggle, Billy Zane, Rob Lowe, Reba McEntire, Jason Alexander. The Colonel became a rotating mascot, a joke, a marketing gimmick. In 2017, KFC released a romance novella, Tender Wings of Desire, featuring Colonel Sanders as the love interest in a Victorian England setting. Available as a free download. In 2019, KFC commissioned a free video game, I Love You, Colonel Sanders, a finger-lickin' good dating simulator. The man who'd spent his life perfecting fried chicken, who'd been rejected 1,009 times before succeeding, who'd fought to protect his recipe from degradation, he was now a cartoon character in a dating sim. Sanders's family has nothing to do with KFC. They severed ties decades ago. Claudia lived quietly in Shelbyville until 1996. She watched the company her husband built become something he wouldn't recognize. She watched his image morph into parody. She never gave interviews about it. The unspoken hero stayed silent.
Blackwood Hall sat empty after the Settles bought it in 1984. The Sanderses moved to Canada. The house remained largely untouched. Original stove, original furnishings, Sanders memorabilia. The Claudia Sanders dinner house operated next door. The Settles ran it, maintaining Sanders' original recipes: Southern cooking, family style, country ham, fried chicken, yeast rolls, creamed spinach, pies. On May 10, 1999, the day after Mother's Day, the restaurant burned to the ground. The Settles rebuilt, larger banquet facilities, state-of-the-art kitchen. The new building opened in 2000. The country charm remained. Sanders's recipes remained. The restaurant thrived. Roughly 100,000 guests per year. Monthly revenue $180,000 to $200,000. On Mother's Day alone, the dinner house made over $50,000 and served more than 2,000 guests. Blackwood Hall stood beside it, unchanged. The Settles preserved it. Sanders's kitchen, his Bible, his cufflinks, his Kentucky Colonel certificate, the stove where he trained franchisees. In June 2022, the Settles put everything up for sale. The listing, 3.01 acres of commercially zoned real estate. Blackwood Hall, 5,000 square feet. The Claudia Sanders Dinner House, 25,000 square feet, including 2 dining rooms, commercial kitchen, walk-in freezers, gift shop, upstairs bar and lounge, and the Saddlebred Room, a space covered in photos of saddlebred horses, honoring Shelbyville's identity as the saddlebred capital of the world. Also included, all memorabilia, Sanders's original Kentucky Colonel certificate, a happy birthday letter from President Richard Nixon, Sanders's monogrammed Bible, money clip, wristwatch, cufflinks, the first KFC bucket, the first KFC flag that flew in front of headquarters, the original stove, the pressure cooker, a never-before-seen 16mm film reel titled Promotion Kentucky Style from 1965, and the trademark and likeness of the Claudia Sanders name. Everything Sanders and Claudia built, everything they fought for sale. Initial asking price undisclosed, though agents mentioned $9 million in early reports. Interest poured in, calls from around the world, Japan, Malaysia, Canada, local restaurant groups, serial entrepreneurs, bourbon brands exploring expansion into comfort food. One potential buyer talked about turning Blackwood Hall into a high-end Airbnb. Others explored licensing the famous yeast rolls for supermarket sale. But there was a problem. KFC's parent company, Yum Brands, wasn't happy about the sale. In September 2022, as the property was being marketed, Yum filed new trademark applications to reinforce protections of KFC trademarks. Colonel Sanders' original recipe, Colonel Harland Sanders, it's finger-lickin' good. A KFC representative told the press the filings were routine and unrelated to the sale of Claudia Sanders' dinner house. Potential buyers weren't convinced. If you want to use the Claudia Sanders brand, you have to have a team of intellectual property lawyers, listing agent Jonathan Klunk warned buyers. The issue, Sanders had sold his name, image, and likeness to KFC in 1964. The Claudia Sanders name was separate. She was never part of that sale, but describing Claudia required mentioning her husband, which meant referencing KFC. Yum had no interest in buying the property, but they didn't want a rival fried chicken chain using the Sanders name.
The settlement from 1973, when Sanders sued for $122 million and settled for $1 million, had renamed the restaurant Claudia Sanders Dinner House, removing any reference to the Colonel or KFC. The dinner house could serve Sanders' original chicken recipe as part of a full-service menu, but it couldn't franchise or expand. It's the only non-KFC restaurant authorized to serve Sanders' recipe. Any new owner wanting to expand Claudia Sanders Dinner House into a chain would face litigation from Yum. Interest cooled. Potential buyers backed away. In March 2023, the asking price was cut to $4.9 million. The property remains on the market as of 2025.
The numbers tell the story. Blackwood Hall, 5,000 square feet, built 1866, purchased by Sanders in 1959 for an undisclosed sum, likely modest given Shelbyville real estate values at the time. Sold to the Settles in 1984 for an undisclosed sum. Listed for sale in 2022 at roughly $9 million, bundled with the restaurant. Price dropped to $4.9 million in 2023. Claudia Sanders Dinner House, 25,000 square feet. Built 1959 as KFC warehouse and office. Converted to restaurant in 1968. Burned 1999. Rebuilt 2000. Seats over 700 guests across 2 floors. Annual guests approximately 100,000. Monthly revenue $180,000 to $200,000. Estimated annual revenue $2.1 to $2.4 million. Memorabilia included in sale. Priceless to collectors, difficult to value. Sanders' original Kentucky Colonel certificate. First KFC bucket. First KFC flag. Pressure cooker. Stove used to train franchisees. Bible. Cufflinks. Money clip. Wristwatch. Letter from President Nixon. Unreleased 16mm film from 1965. Sanders' original sale of KFC, $2 million in 1964, equivalent to roughly $19.4 million in 2023 dollars. KFC's value at Sanders' death in 1980, $2 billion in annual sales, roughly $7.3 billion in 2023 dollars. KFC's current scale, over 25,000 locations in 145 countries, annual revenue in the tens of billions. Sanders' net worth at death, $3.5 million. Yum Brands' market cap as of 2025, over $35 billion. The math is clear. Sanders created an empire worth billions. He sold it for millions. He died modestly wealthy, while others became extraordinarily wealthy from his creation. Blackwood Hall represents that gap, a $4.9 million property containing the legacy of a man whose brand is worth billions. The house isn't grand, it's not a mansion, it's a symbol of what Sanders achieved and what he lost. Walk through Blackwood Hall today, if you could, if it weren't tied up in legal complications and market stagnation, and you'd see a time capsule. The foyer, hardwood floors, traditional colonial finishes, nothing ostentatious. The kitchen, the original stove where Sanders trained franchisees sits against the wall, his pressure cooker on a shelf. The counters where Claudia packaged spice blends. The dining room, a table where Sanders ate meals with friends and family. Windows overlooking the property. Simple, functional. The bedrooms, 5,000 square feet means perhaps 4 bedrooms, modest by mansion standards. Sanders and Claudia lived there for 25 years, 2 people in a house built for a family. The memorabilia scattered throughout, Kentucky Colonel certificate framed on a wall, Bible on a bedside table, cufflinks in a drawer, wristwatch in a case. The film reel, promotion Kentucky style, contents unknown, never viewed publicly. Outside, the red roof, the white clapboard siding, the shuttered windows, the front porch, Kentucky architecture, 1866, preserved. Next door, the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, the saddlebred room with photos of prize horses, the commercial kitchen with walk-in freezers, the gift shop selling yeast rolls and memorabilia, the upstairs bar and lounge. 3 acres, a house,
a restaurant, a legacy. And silence. The property has sat on the market for over 2 years. Interested buyers call, ask about the trademark issues, consult lawyers, walk away. The Settles are ready to retire. They've run the dinner house since 1974, 50 years. They've maintained Sanders' recipes, honored Claudia's legacy, preserved Blackwood Hall. They want the next owner to do the same. Quote, "This is not just real estate," Morgan Hancock said. "This is not just a building or a piece of land. This is a legacy that we are passing on." But legacies are complicated when corporations own the trademark to your name.
The Claudia Sanders Dinner House still operates, daily service, Southern cooking. The menu hasn't changed significantly since 1968. Kentucky ham, chicken livers, Kentucky hot browns, fried green tomatoes, yeast rolls, famous, people come from across the state for them. Fried chicken, of course, Sanders' original recipe, not the KFC version, the real version. 40 employees, some have worked there for decades. They know the stories. Ask your server, and they'll tell you about the Colonel, about Claudia, about the Settles. Tourists come, locals come, people on the Bourbon Trail. Shelbyville is near several distilleries, including Jep the Creed and Bullet. The dinner house is a popular stop for large groups. Jeanette Marson, president and CEO of Shelby KY Tourism, describes it. You're surrounded by nostalgia when you walk into that restaurant. You can feel the history. A portrait of Sanders and Claudia greets guests at the entrance, both past, Sanders in 1980, Claudia in 1996. But their presence remains in the food, in the conversation, in the atmosphere. A lot of older people come because they are reliving their days of yesteryear, Marson says. You can ask your server, and they are happy to regale stories. The restaurant serves memory as much as food. The recipes are authentic. The yeast rolls are made the same way Claudia made them. The chicken is pressure cooked with Sanders' 11 herbs and spices. This is what Sanders fought for, not KFC's simplified cost-cutting version, the original. The version that made people drive miles out of their way in the 1940s to eat at Sanders Court and Cafe in Corbin. The dinner house makes roughly $2 million a year, not billions, millions, a successful regional restaurant, not a global empire. It's what Sanders wanted, a place serving good food, made right, honoring tradition. And it's for sale, waiting for someone willing to navigate the trademark minefield.
The trademarks are the poison pill. Claudia Sanders' name and likeness are included in the sale. According to the Settles and their representatives, Claudia was never part of the 1964 sale of KFC. Her identity is separate. The buyer of Blackwood Hall and the dinner house would own those rights. But KFC, owned by Yum Brands, disagrees. Or at least they're aggressive enough with their IP enforcement that any buyer would need a team of lawyers. You'd have to have a team of intellectual property lawyers, listing agent Clunk warned. This isn't for someone who isn't well versed in franchise law and intellectual property. Yum filed new trademark applications in September 2022. Colonel Sanders' original recipe. Colonel Harland Sanders. It's finger-lickin' good. These are standard protections for a multi-billion-dollar brand. But the timing raised questions. The property had just hit the market. Yum insists the filings were routine, unrelated to the sale. Potential buyers are cautious. If they buy the property and attempt to franchise Claudia Sanders' dinner house, Yum could sue. The 1973 settlement allowed the dinner house to operate as a single location using Sanders' original recipe, but franchising was forbidden. Any expansion would likely trigger litigation. Yum has deep pockets. They can afford protracted legal battles. Most buyers can't. So the property sits, a successful restaurant generating $2 million annually, a historic house filled with memorabilia, a legacy waiting to be passed on, but the legal shadow looms. The irony: Sanders sold KFC to retire. He ended up suing the buyers for degrading his food. He settled for $1 million and was silenced. Now, 45 years after his death, the company he built is preventing the sale of the home where he lived. Not directly, not explicitly, just by existing, by owning the trademarks, by being so large that any competition is a threat.
Sanders wore the white suit for the last time in his casket, the costume that defined him, the persona that trapped him.
He'd adopted it in 1955 after Governor Ruby Laffoon made him a Kentucky colonel. A promotional gimmick, a way to stand out. The white suit, black string tie, white goatee. The Southern gentleman. The colonel. It worked. People remembered him. The suit became iconic. But Sanders couldn't take it off. By the 1960s, he was the colonel. Not Harland, not Sanders, the colonel. In the 1970s, when he traveled 200,000 miles a year as KFC's brand ambassador, he wore the suit every day. Public appearances, interviews, autograph signings, airport terminals, hotel lobbies. Always the suit. At home in Blackwood Hall, he could relax. He'd wear regular clothes. He'd attend church in a regular suit. He'd cook in the kitchen without the costume. But the world only saw the colonel. In 1976, a survey ranked him as the world's second most recognizable celebrity. His face was everywhere. The white suit was his prison. By the time he died in 1980, the colonel had consumed Harland Sanders. The man who'd struggled for 65 years, who'd been rejected 1,009 times, who'd built an empire in his late 60s, he was gone. Only the mascot remained. His funeral instructions specified the white suit. He was buried in it. The costume followed him into the grave. And after death, it got worse. Actors started playing him. Comedians parodied him. Video games featured him as a dating sim character. Romance novels cast him as a Victorian love interest. The man became a meme. The suit outlived him. Worn by strangers selling chicken he'd have called slop. Claudia watched this happen. For 16 years after his death, she watched his image morph into parody. She never commented publicly. The unspoken hero stayed silent. When she died in 1996, she was buried beside him at Cave Hill Cemetery, her name on the stone next to his. Together, but overshadowed. The white suit hangs in the Hall of Memory. Not the man, the costume.
Josephine King married Harland Sanders in 1909. She was 18, he was 19. They had 3 children. The marriage lasted 39 years. It was not happy. Sanders couldn't hold a job. He was volatile, argumentative, prone to fistfights. He worked on railroads, practiced law until he punched a client, sold insurance until he was fired, ran a ferry until a bridge made it obsolete. Josephine raised the children. She endured poverty, Sanders's failures, his absences. In 1932, their son Harland Jr. died at age 20 from complications after a tonsillectomy. Sanders fell into depression. The marriage strained further. By the 1940s, Sanders was running a successful restaurant in Corbin. He hired Claudia Leddington as a waitress. The affair began. Josephine knew. She hired Claudia anyway. Keep your enemies close. Or perhaps acknowledgement that the marriage was already over. In 1947, after 39 years, Sanders and Josephine divorced. He married Claudia in 1949. Josephine largely disappeared from Sanders's public narrative. His autobiographies mention her briefly. His biographers give her a few paragraphs. She's the first wife, the failed marriage, the woman left behind. What happened to her after the divorce is unclear. She lived quietly. She died in obscurity. No record of her reaction to Sanders's success. No interviews, no memoirs. She raised his children through decades of poverty and failure. When success finally came, she was gone. Sanders built an empire with his second wife. Claudia packaged spices, managed logistics, helped franchise KFC. She got a restaurant named after her. She was honored, celebrated. Josephine got nothing. Not even a footnote in most accounts. The women who built men's empires rarely get credit. Claudia got more than most, the unspoken hero, as agents called her. But even she lived in Sanders's shadow. Josephine didn't even get a shadow, just absence. The first KFC bucket sits in Blackwood Hall, part of the memorabilia included in the sale. Pete Harmon, the franchisee in Salt Lake City who first said yes to Sanders, invented it. In 1957, he created a paper bucket to hold 14 pieces of fried chicken. Convenient, portable, perfect for families.
He called it the bucket meal. It included 14 pieces of chicken, 5 bread rolls, and a pint of gravy. It sold for $3.50, about $38 in 2023 dollars. The bucket became iconic. Red and white stripes, Sanders' face, Kentucky Fried Chicken in bold letters. By the 1960s, the bucket was KFC's signature packaging. By the 1970s, it was a cultural symbol. Families bought buckets for Sunday dinners, picnics, celebrations. The bucket represented convenience, affordability, American comfort food. It also represented commodification. Sanders' face on a disposable container, thrown away after the chicken was eaten. The first bucket, prototype or early production, the listing doesn't specify, sits in Blackwood Hall. A relic, evidence of an innovation that changed fast food packaging. It's worth something to collectors, maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands, hard to value without auction. But its symbolic value exceeds its monetary value. The bucket represents the moment Sanders' recipe became a product, the moment personal became corporate, the moment the kernel became a logo. Sanders hated what KFC became. He hated the simplified recipe, the cost-cutting, the degradation of quality. But he couldn't stop it. He'd sold the company. He'd signed the contracts. The bucket, his face on disposable packaging, was the consequence. And now it's for sale, along with everything else.
The pressure cooker changed everything. Before Sanders adopted pressure frying, chicken took 30 minutes to cook, too long for a restaurant. Customers wouldn't wait. Sanders experimented. He tried deep frying, too greasy. He tried pan frying, too slow. He tried a pressure cooker, modified for frying instead of steaming. It worked. 9 minutes. The chicken was crispy outside, juicy inside. The 11 herbs and spices penetrated the meat under pressure. Sanders patented the process, or tried to. The exact legal status of his pressure frying method is murky. What's clear, he pioneered the technique and it became standard in the industry. The cooker he used, either the original or an early model, sits in Blackwood Hall, part of the memorabilia. It's a commercial-grade cooker, heavy, industrial, not a kitchen appliance, a piece of equipment. It represents innovation. Sanders didn't invent pressure cooking, but he adapted it for frying chicken. He turned a slow process into a fast one. He made fried chicken viable for high-volume restaurants. That innovation built KFC. Without pressure frying, Sanders couldn't have franchised. Restaurants wouldn't have bought into a system that required 30-minute cook times. The cooker also represents labor. Hours spent experimenting, batches of chicken ruined, burns, failures, adjustments. Sanders was in his 50s when he perfected the technique. 50 years old, tweaking a pressure cooker in a Kentucky gas station. Most people are winding down careers at 50. Sanders was just starting. The cooker in Blackwood Hall is evidence, physical proof of the work, the innovation, the desperation that drove him to succeed. And it's for sale. For $4.9 million, you get the cooker, the house, the restaurant, the memorabilia, and the legal headache of negotiating with Yum Brands.
Thomas and Cherry Settle bought the Claudia Sanders dinner house in 1970. They'd worked for the Sanderses for years. Thomas was like family. Sanders walked Cherry down the aisle at her wedding. The Settles ran the restaurant for 54 years. They maintained Sanders's recipes. They honored Claudia's legacy. They rebuilt after the 1999 fire. They expanded the dining rooms, upgraded the kitchen, added the saddlebread room. They're in their 80s now, ready to retire, ready to pass the torch. This is not just real estate, listing agent Morgan Hancock said. This is not just a building or a piece of land. This is a legacy that we are passing on, and we want to make sure that we pass it on to the best of the best. The Settles want the next owner to preserve the dinner house, to keep serving Sanders' original chicken, to honor Claudia's memory, to maintain the tradition. But they also need to sell. They've been running the restaurant since 1970, 54 years. They're tired. The price dropped from roughly $9 million to $4.9 million. Interest is cooled. Buyers are cautious because of the trademarks. The Settles are stuck. They built their lives around this restaurant. They preserved Sanders' legacy when KFC abandoned it. They fought to maintain quality, authenticity, tradition. And now they can't sell. Because the company Sanders built, the company that bought him out, degraded his recipe, turned him into a cartoon, looms over the sale. The Settles are victims of corporate consolidation, small operators crushed by the weight of a multi-billion-dollar brand. They're not asking for billions, just $4.9 million for a functioning restaurant, a historic house, irreplaceable memorabilia, and the rights to Claudia Sanders' name. But the shadow of Yum Brands makes the sale nearly impossible. The Saddlebred Room honors Shelbyville's identity, the saddlebred capital of the world. American saddlebred horses, high-stepping, elegant, bred for show. The walls are covered with photos, prize-winning horses, competitions, local breeders, champions. It's a quirky touch, a room in a fried chicken restaurant dedicated to horses, but it makes sense in Shelbyville. The town's economy and culture revolve around saddlebreds. The Kentucky State Fair World's Championship Horse Show, held annually in Louisville, draws saddlebred enthusiasts from around the world. Many train in Shelbyville. The Claudia Sanders Dinner House embraced local identity. It's not just a restaurant, it's a community hub, a gathering place, a celebration of Shelbyville. Sanders understood this. He wasn't a corporate executive, he was a Kentucky colonel. An honorary title, yes, but one that signified commitment to the state's culture. He wore the white suit, told Southern stories, emphasized Kentucky heritage. KFC abandoned that. By 1991, the company had rebranded from Kentucky Fried Chicken to KFC. The name change was officially to modernize, to distance the brand from fried during the health-conscious 1990s, but it also distanced the brand from Kentucky, from the South, from Sanders' roots. KFC became global, multinational, corporate. The Southern identity, the things Sanders built the brand on, was erased. The Claudia Sanders Dinner House kept it. Southern cooking, Kentucky ham, yeast rolls made the old way, fried chicken with Sanders' original recipe, and the Saddlebred Room, honoring local culture. It's the opposite of KFC's globalization. It's regional, specific, rooted. And it's why the dinner house matters. It's the last authentic connection to what Sanders created before it was commodified.
The question isn't whether Colonel Sanders succeeded. He did. He went from broke at 65 to wealthy at 73. He built a global brand. He became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The question is what success cost him. He sold KFC for $2 million in 1964. By 1980, the company was generating $2 billion in annual sales. He'd sold too early, for too little. He spent the rest of his life watching the new owners degrade his recipe. He called their gravy wallpaper paste. He sued them for $122 million. He settled for $1 million and was contractually silenced. He became a brand ambassador for food he despised. He traveled 200,000 miles a year, wearing the white suit, smiling for cameras, selling chicken he wouldn't eat. He couldn't escape the costume. The colonel consumed Harland Sanders. The man disappeared into the mascot. After his death, it got worse. His image became a joke. Actors played him in commercials. He appeared in dating sims and romance novels. The corporation he built turned him into a cartoon. His widow, Claudia, watched this happen for 16 years. The unspoken hero, the woman who packaged spices at midnight, who helped build the empire, who got a restaurant named after her. She lived in his shadow, then in the shadow of his commodified image. Blackwood Hall stands as a monument to what Sanders achieved and what he lost. A modest house in Shelbyville, Kentucky, 5,000 square feet, not a mansion, a home. Inside, his Bible, his cufflinks, his pressure cooker, his stove. Evidence of a life spent struggling, then succeeding, then fighting to protect what he'd built. For sale, $4.9 million. Includes the house, the restaurant, the memorabilia, the trademarks to Claudia's name. But no buyers, because the company Sanders built still casts a shadow, because Yum Brands owns the rights to his name, his image, his legacy, because corporate consolidation makes it nearly impossible for small operators to survive. The Settles want to retire. They've run the dinner house for 54 years. They've honored Sanders' legacy. They've maintained his recipes. They've fought to preserve authenticity. But they can't sell.
The market is stagnant. Buyers are scared off by trademark issues. The property languishes. This is the tragedy. Not that Sanders struggled, not that he succeeded late, but that his success was taken from him, commodified, corporatized, turned into something he wouldn't recognize. The white suit in his casket, the actors playing him in commercials, the bucket with his face thrown away after dinner. He built an empire. Others profited from it. His face is everywhere. The man is gone.
Blackwood Hall sits on 3 acres in Shelbyville, Kentucky. White clapboard siding, red roof, shuttered windows. Built 1866, 5,000 square feet. Colonel Sanders moved there in 1959. He lived there until 1984. He and Claudia made it the headquarters of Kentucky Fried Chicken. They trained franchisees in the kitchen, they packaged spices late at night, they built an empire. Then they sold. Sanders to pursue his role as brand ambassador, the house to the Settles, who preserved it. 41 years later, it's for sale. The restaurant still operates, the memorabilia still sits inside, the legacy still waits to be claimed. But the sale is stalled. The price dropped from $9 million to $4.9 million. Interest cooled. The trademarks scare buyers. The shadow of Yum Brands looms. The Settles are in their 80s, ready to retire, unable to sell. The restaurant serves 2,000 guests on Mother's Day, $100,000 per year, $2 million in annual revenue. Authentic Southern cooking, Sanders' original chicken recipe, Claudia's yeast rolls. The Saddlebread Room honors local culture. The portraits of Sanders and Claudia greet guests, the servers tell stories, the food is made right. Everything Sanders fought for, everything he wanted to protect, and it's stuck, caught between a legacy worth billions and a market that won't support a $4.9 million sale. The volcanic rock beneath Edinburgh Castle was impermeable. It couldn't hold water, but it held violence for 1,000 years. The white clapboard siding of Blackwood Hall is permeable. It can't hold empires, can't stop corporate consolidation, can't prevent commodification. But it holds memory, Sanders' struggle, Claudia's quiet strength, the Settles' 54 years of service, the 11 herbs and spices made right, served with pride. The question isn't whether the property will sell. Eventually, it will. Someone will buy it. Maybe they'll preserve the legacy. Maybe they'll turn it into an Airbnb. Maybe they'll license the yeast rolls. Maybe they'll fight Yum Brands in court. The question is what happens to legacies when corporations own the trademarks, when success requires selling out, when the price of empire is losing control. Sanders wore the white suit into his grave. Actors wear it in commercials today. The costume outlived the man. Blackwood Hall waits, a modest house, a successful restaurant, a legacy for sale. Not grand, not tragic in the classical sense, just American, a story of struggle, success, betrayal, and commodification. The house stands, the restaurant serves, the white suit hangs in memory, and the empire Sanders built grinds on, selling chicken he'd call slop, using his face to sell billions of dollars of food he'd never approve. The Rock remembers, even if the corporation doesn't.